So if you've been in real estate a long time, you've definitely heard of the BRRRR method, which stands for buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. Now we know that it works in residential real estate, everybody's doing it, but does it work in commercial real estate? Stick around to the end of this video to find out. If you're new here, I appreciate you stopping by. My last video got a lot of subscribers, so I really appreciate everybody who's new. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button. But what this channel is all about is either if you're transitioning from residential real estate and you want to get into commercial real estate, or you're brand new and you want to get into commercial real estate investing. So my name's Graham Story. I've been in commercial real estate for almost 8 years as a broker. I started buying buildings about a year and a half ago. At this point, I have about $5 million in commercial real estate, not all by myself, but with partners. And I have a podcast where I talk all about this stuff and this YouTube channel to show my journey. In this video, I'm going to explain what exactly is the BRRRR method, how I use the BRRRR method to buy a commercial real estate building. Spoiler alert, it does work. And what you're going to need to accomplish this yourself. So what is the BRRRR method? Like I said in the beginning, it stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. The first step is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to go out there and you're going to buy a building. You're going to buy a piece of property, you're going to put it under contract, and you're going to close it. Step number 2 is you're going to rehab it. So whether that's just painting, maybe it's re-graveling, maybe it's putting a new roof on, maybe it's putting a new HVAC system in, something to improve the property to show a bank or a lender that you've actually put time and effort and energy to raise the property's value. Step number 3, once you've renovated it, you're going to go out there, you're going to put it on the market for a lease, and you're going to find yourself a good tenant. Preferably, it's going to be a credible tenant who's been in business for a long time, who maybe has a good reputation around the town, and somebody you're going to want to be in a contract with for 3 to 5 years, because that's typically how long commercial real estate leases are. So once you do that, once you've bought the property, in step number 1, I skipped a little caveat. When you buy the property, it needs to be a good deal. You can't do this with a market value deal. You need to be able to find a good under market value property where the numbers, where there's a lot of meat on the bone, where there's a lot of upside. So once you get the tenant in place and you get a lease signed, you're going to take that to a bank. And when you take it to the bank, you're going to refinance it. And what you're going to be refinancing is typically going to be your hard money. And I'll get into this in a little bit of exactly how I did it. But once you refinance it, now you own that property, and typically you own it without putting any money out of your own pocket. And the very last step is you repeat. So let me get into the story of how I use this method to buy a building. So last summer, me and my business partner put a property under contract. It's a property we've been cold calling on for a long time. And this is an owner we knew well because we'd been following up with him for almost a year. We convinced him to do seller financing. So we bought the property for $450,000. He agreed to do seller financing for 75% of the property, which works out to being $337,500. That's the loan we got from him as a seller financing loan. And he was going to be in first position. So that's very important. First position, remember that. Now we needed to come up with the down payment, the other 25% of the deal. And we needed to come up with some money for improvements, the renovation portion. So the down payment, the other 25%, is $112,500. Now there's a couple ways you could do this. You could have $112,000 sitting around that you could put into this deal. We didn't do that. We didn't have that money sitting around our bank account. I wish we did. So that's option number 1. Option number 2, you could go out there and you can bring an investor on the deal who has $112,000 and they would bring forth the money and you would do all the work. Or option number 3, which is what we did, which is certainly the most highest risk, but we were okay taking this risk and it ended up working out okay. We got hard money. What hard money is where you go out and you find a lender who's okay with lending you the money for the down payment. Now the key here is they were not in first position. They were actually in second position. So to go out there and find a second position hard money note is a lot harder than you think. But basically what that means is if we were to not pay, the seller who financed to us was in first position. So if we didn't pay, he would get the building back first, or he would get paid first. And typically that means he'd probably take the building back, maybe he'd sell it, and then he'd use that to pay off his loan that we owe him. Anything left over would go to the second position note holder, which is obviously a much riskier position to be in. So to find this kind of loan is hard, but it is possible because we did it. So we closed on this property totaling around $450,000. Then we had improvements of about, I think, $20,000 total. So we were all in for about $470,000. 75% of it came from a seller who financed to us. The other 25% came from a hard money lender who we found. Plus they also gave us the money for the renovation. So our loan from the hard money lender ended up being a little bit more than 25%. Anyway, so that's how we bought the building. Once we bought the building, we used the money to renovate the property. So we replaced the HVAC system. This was an industrial building. It's 10,000 square feet. We renovated the office. The office was only about 1,000 square feet. So we painted it. We did new flooring. And then we also put a new HVAC system in there to heat and cool the office. And then we made sure the roof was repaired. We pressure washed the outside. And after that, that was about everything. So it wasn't that much work compared to like a residential deal where you'd be gutting the whole thing, or maybe not gutting, but floors, kitchens, bathrooms, the roof, all the above, maybe the plumbing, the electrical. That's why we like warehouses. I have a whole nother video where I talk about warehouses. I'll put it right here. But we love warehouses because it's simple. You got the warehouse space. Typically they'll have a little bit of office, maybe like 1,000 feet. So in this scenario, like I said, it was 10,000 square feet total and 1,000 of it was actually office. And all we did was repaint it, refloor it, put a new HVAC in there, make sure the roof was good. And that totaled to be about $20,000. So here's the interesting part. There was actually an existing tenant in the building paying us rent. However, their rent was way under market. So in order for us to go refinance it, the refinance financing depended on really two things. One of them being that did we actually do any improvements to the property? And then the second thing is, the loan actually has to make sense. The debt coverage ratio actually has to make sense. We had to be able to get a rent that was high enough to justify the loan amount. So we went to the tenant and said, hey, we're getting a loan for this property. We're going to have to raise your rent. Here's the rent that it'll need to be, and it was substantially more than what they were paying because they had been in the property for a very, very long time. The previous landlord had never raised the rent. This is the worst part of real estate. We don't like this part, but in order for us to get that loan, we had to bring it up, but we had no option. So we told them that, and we were very transparent. We said, hey, this is what it is. This is what we need to get our loan done, and we'd love for you to stay, and we're going to do all these things for you for the building. We're going to give you new office space. We're going to give you new HVAC. We're going to make sure the roof's good. So we improved the building a lot and brought them up to market. And we thought they were going to say no. We thought we were going to release the building. However, they said yes. They renewed, to our surprise. So we did all this work, re-signed a new lease. Then we took it back to a bank, more traditional bank, a local credit union, and they gave us a loan for $470,000, which is the exact amount we needed to pay off our seller, who did the seller financing note, our hard money lender, who did the down payment and the renovations. And we walked away owning the building 100% free and clear, and it cash flows a couple $1,000s a month. This is one of my favorite deals we've done. I don't say all that to brag. I only say that to give you an example of what you can actually do, that you can actually use the BRRRR method in commercial real estate. I'd heard people talking about residential for years. I thought, I wonder if you can try that in commercial. So let's try it. So me and my business partner, we went out there, we tried it, and it turns out it actually works. Now, last but not least, what are the things that you actually need to do to accomplish this? So one of the first things, like I said, is you need to find a good deal. You cannot do this with a deal that's just a market value deal and there's no meat on the bone. It has to be a deeply discounted or at least a pretty good price on the property, because you have to have enough room to make the improvements and then refinance out. And typically the bank, I meant to mention this earlier, is going to want to refinance you out at 80% of loan to value. I can't believe I forgot that, but yeah, that's one of the biggest things. The bank wants to refinance you out at 80% loan to value. And so we had to get an appraiser when we went through the refinance process, and the property appraised for $600,000. So we have a loan on it for $470,000, but it appraised for $600,000. So you might say that's pretty risky. However, it's not risky because our value, we created so much value that our loan to value is still 80%, and we're still at a pretty conservative number. So anyways, yes, you need a good deal. The second thing you need is lending relationships. Now these take time. You have to go out there, you have to put your name out there. Maybe that can come from you brokering deals if you're a broker. Maybe it comes from doing deals in the market. Maybe you're in residential and you have a good track record and you already have a good lending relationship. That matters a lot. If you don't have any of that and you're feeling discouraged, don't feel discouraged. The key is just to start. So if you're watching this and you don't have any of that and you're feeling discouraged, don't worry about it. It took me a long time. Just start now so that at some point you will have that track record. It's not like this is a fast process. This is something that takes time, but once you put in the time and you put in the work, it will pay off. So take this as a sign just to get started now, whether it's partnering with somebody, whether it is in residential, whatever it is, just start now. That's the most important part. And for those lending relationships, you need somebody who's going to be the bank. So you need, like I said, local credit unions, and you also need someone who's going to be the hard money lender. So that's typically going to be somebody in your circle who's wealthy and is okay with lending hard money to somebody, or maybe you can find them online in real estate groups, wherever it may be. You need somebody who's going to be the hard money lender, or an investor who's actually going to invest in your deals, or maybe just have a bunch of money sitting around and you can do this method with your cash. And then the third thing you need is you need a good tenant. So whether that's putting the property on the market with a broker and finding a good solid tenant so you can take it to the bank and refinance it, whether it's doing the grunt work yourself, putting it on Facebook Marketplace, maybe signing up for a LoopNet listing, contacting everybody, maybe running some ads, whatever it may be, you need a good solid tenant. So in conclusion, yes, you can do a commercial BRRRR. It's very possible. There's a lot of things that need to go right. There's a lot of planning that needs to come into this, and you have to find a good deal, but it's very possible. And hopefully this gives you some insight on how to do it, and it's encouraging to some of you guys. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one.